Hi, everyone. It is Kate K. I am back with another of our fireside chats. This week, we are super lucky. We are joined by Shani, who is a member of the AfghanEvac community. And we're going to be talking to you guys about ways to build up meaningful support systems in this work. So thank you for joining us, Shani. I really appreciate your time. And do you want to give a little intro to the crowd?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. This is so wonderful. I'm a recovering journalist. I worked freelance for many years covering racial and gender inequality and everything from the arts to my probably biggest project ever was the Dylann Roof trial with the Mother Emanuel massacre in Charleston, South Carolina. So I've got a little bit of background in working and remaining present during secondary trauma type situations, which is something that all of us working here are really going throughout this process of working with these groups of people who are going through so much and are hoping to get out of their situations.
Right. So, okay, that's a really interesting background, and especially working on the Dylann Roof trial. I mean, that's exposure to prolonged trauma and having to figure out a way to sort of maintain your sense of self as you're going forward. So, definitely relevant to what we're doing. Thank you for offering your expertise. I know that we've chatted about this topic a little bit before, and it was interesting to me because our understanding of support systems were a little bit different. So I was thinking, here's how we build up those social support systems. And you were really thinking, here are the ways that we can also build up like our own individual support systems. So let's touch on both. No pressure, but let's start with the building up a social support system.
Yes.
So when you are working in those environments, what does that look like for you? And how do you go about sort of bringing people into your world so that they can relate to it, but not necessarily exposing them to like the dark parts,
The
right?
trauma,
Yeah.
exactly. You don't want to spread more trauma.
Right.
Well, the two really go hand in hand. As far as building up that, personal social support system, it's so easy to disassociate from people around you who aren't going through what you're going through and aren't seeing what you're seeing as you're going through this. So first of all, it's most important to be honest and say, I'm working on these very difficult, difficult things right now. It's very intense. I don't necessarily have a cutoff. I might not be as present as I normally would be in our friendship, in our group friendship, but I'm here, please keep it coming. We need those little reminders, those little grabs throughout the day that there is something going on outside of what our heads are encircled
Right.
in with
Right.
this work. So for me, I have a girlfriend text group. It's made up of people they range from people I went to middle school with to college, even, and some people that kind of came in as we were adults. And we are just shooting stuff back and forth every day about the mundane, stupid, I like this hand cream,
Yeah.
I had a great workout today,
The big stuff. Yeah.
yes, my mother-in-law is driving me crazy, all of that kind of stuff. And I don't always engage as much as I used to since working on the Afghanistan. I same went with the Dylann Roof trial, but just having it there as a reminder that there is life outside of it,
Right.
and that there are people who love me enough to tell me the dumbest thing on their mind on a whim.
Right.
So things like that are helpful.
Yeah, that's interesting because with my friend group, I tend to be like the helicopter friend, right? Like I tend to be the person who's always checking in with everybody and trying to manage our schedules and make sure we're seeing each other. And as soon as this stuff started, that really changed for me because the capacity that I used to offer to my social network, I was now offering to AfghanEvac.
Right.
And my friend chats went dead silent. And it was super painful. I thought people were mad or what was going on. And so finally I went and they said, well, we just don't want to bother you. And I said, I really need to be bothered, right? Like
Exactly.
I really still need to feel included.
Exactly.
So the way that the friendship dynamics used to be aren't going to work right now. Like I can't be that driving force, but like I really need to know that you guys are still there and willing to reach out. And they've
Exactly.
been wonderful. Like
Yeah,
they can go days and days on just the wildest, dumbest topics and never hear from me. And then I'll pop in and it
yep,
doesn't seem to phase them. So I think like
exactly.
setting those expectations for here's what I need has been super important for me.
Very much so.
Yeah.
It's, like I said, you have to be honest from the start. And, you can't, for obvious reasons, we can't share the details of what's going on. But, for instance, back in August, when nobody was quite sure, what apps were secure, how to communicate, et cetera. And the people I was working with, received a memo saying no WhatsApp whatsoever,
Right.
period. Out of a little spite, I still haven't gone back. But anyway. um, but I texted all my friends in that group and I said, I can't explain to you exactly what's going on right now, but I need for us to get off of WhatsApp. Would you mind switching to Signal for me? Because it's really important to me just to have this bit of normalcy in my life right now.
Right.
And it's helping keep me grounded. It's helping with my own work that I'm doing. And I miss you guys.
Yeah.
And all but one were completely I don't know what was going on.
I'm not going to talk about that one. No.
Not gonna go over that, but I mean, it's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
And if they're your friends, and you're trying to keep that routine of that friendship going, you're still putting yourself out there and showing that you care by asking for something like that.
Right. I think that we tend to feel such guilt, especially because we're working in such a heavy space and we're like, well, we don't want to bring other people into it. You know what I mean? But there's a way that you can manage these relationships so that they're still offering you support and you're not necessarily bringing them into that heavy stuff.
Exactly.
My question about that is then, do you have any guidance for here's how to explain this stuff to people? Obviously,
Yeah.
for security reasons, we really can't, right? So
Right.
how do you try to get them just to understand what your experience is?
One of the things that has been my go-to is imagine that the work that you're doing on a day-to-day basis was literally relied upon for a person's life and their children's lives, and how much pressure that feels like coming on to you. And that's, this is how heavy it is. And, I have to take it as seriously as I take my own kids and my own husband and, the things going on in my life. So unfortunately, friends, my head is not always in a light space right now.
Right.
And I just hope that you will all, bear with me, is kind of what I say. And, I'll say to them, you've seen the news, you've seen what's going on in the world, you've seen, what happened with the withdrawal in August, you've seen what's happening now in Ukraine. Imagine all of that compounding into your day-to-day activities.
Right.
That's how heavy this is. And that usually they don't want to ask. Usually they're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But
I like your phrase of my head is not in a light space. That is something that I feel like people can really attach to. I mean, I've been trying to explain just the emotions behind it to people, not necessarily even like the facts, but just saying, look, like I'm grieving and I'm stressed and here's how my body is manifesting it, because that's the stuff that like a lot of people can relate to. But I remember my partner works in architecture, and the biggest stressor he's having right now is about cabinets at work, ordering the right cabinets at work. It's causing him insane stress. And then he was like, okay, well, how's your day? And I was like, the Taliban, man, like they're just, like we're not on the same page. And we had this moment of looking at each other and being like, like we're definitely not in the same space, but like the driving force behind it, like we're both stressed and we're both overwhelmed and overburdened. So like that's where we're kind of able to find that common basis and say, okay, I hear that you're stressed and I know that you need support. Like, what does that look like in this moment? But it took some time to wade through to find the commonality.
In my case, in the beginning, my husband was actually working with me on this.
Okay.
And so in the very beginning, he was right there he hadn't, his office hadn't gone back to in person yet, and it was kind of a lull in his work. And it's brought a different level of understanding now that he's back at work and he's not involved. But at the same time, we still struggle a bit. I mean, he works in the organ transplant industry. So
stressful also.
It's very stressful as well. But it almost causes even more of a disconnect, because we're both so focused on the problem of the day that, and then on top of that, he doesn't have the background and experience in secondary trauma that I have. So when we first started working on this together, I would have to look him in the eye and say, honey, I need you to put the phone down, close the laptop. I'll take over comms. You need to go upstairs and lay down. And I think that is something, as we're 9 months into this, 10 months, I have no idea anymore.
Forever.
But I think that taking those pauses with our partners, both in this work with AfghanEvac and our cases, and with our partners in the rest of our lives, taking that moment to look somebody in the eyes and say, I need this, or you're not okay right now, and I will take on a little bit of that burden. And it's just a back and forth.
Right. It's one of the things I've also noticed is that while I desperately want people to understand what my experience is, I also really desperately need them to kind of help me maintain that normalcy. So, if we go out and I'm with my friends and they ask what we're doing, and I'll tell them, but really what I want to hear about is something really dumb.
Exactly.
I just want to I want to have a beer with my friends and not have to be in that headspace. And sometimes that's what that support system needs to be, is not just a place where you can go and safely share, but also to kind of unwind and disconnect, because no matter who you are, you have different facets of your life, right? And in this particular work, sometimes it bleeds into that. And I think that it's important to maintain those boundaries and traditions that kind of help you remember who you are as a complete person.
Exactly.
One of the other things that you have talked a lot about is not just support systems socially, but here is how we can maintain, certain traditions or techniques that are going to help us. So can you talk to me a little bit more about that, I guess?
I think the thing that I've used the most in recent months is, I call it my calm the fuck down walk. And there are days where I go on 3 or 4 calm the fuck down walks a day.
The first one didn't take is what it is.
Just, things come in so fast. And, we need to be able to kind of reset, and things come in so fast and our brains are going so fast that I think for people who work in spaces like this, meditation doesn't necessarily work, because just that idea of sitting still, you feel like you have to be doing something. I
do not have inner peace. Yeah, I learned that in this space.
Yeah.
It's not for me.
The same. But I'll charge out the door, just grab my phone and charge out the door. And every morning I go for that walk anyway, for the sake of trying to maintain some semblance of health through this. But anytime that I just can feel the pressure mounting, or the anxiety mounting, or just too much chatter in my head and on Signal, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I just grab my phone and charge out the door. And that way I can still stay connected to whatever problems need to be solved that day. But it's also kind of a meditative moment where I'm just charging down the street.
Yeah, that makes sense. I find that moving your body, people don't give that enough credit, right? Because you don't think about it, but when you're moving your body, your mind is automatically offering some energy to something that is not your work, right? It is thinking about how to propel you forward, or what, if you're going to take the next left or right, or how good it feels, or what doesn't feel so great. And I think that sometimes people underestimate that, your body can really give you that escape, as long as you're knowing how to use it.
And it's easy. It's not that hard to work into your daily routine. I mean, when I was working on the trial in Charleston, the courthouse was maybe 1.5 miles from my house. So I never drove. I took an Uber only if I was running really late. That was, I would grab a huge bottle of sparkling water at the store and walk the whole way there and walk the whole way home.
That's really smart.
It was a good transitionary space. From the trauma to having your day-to-day that you have to deal with at home.
That's the other thing I'm noticing, is that I think people don't realize that like certain spaces, if you are in them enough, can actually start to remind you of that trauma because that's where you're experiencing it, right? So like
Exactly.
it's even, and this makes me laugh, but my doctor years ago was like, I have terrible sleep. And he was like, Kate, you need to stop eating in bed. And I was like, that's
Yeah.
dumb. I live in a studio apartment, sir. Like, where else am I supposed to eat dinner? But he was like, your mind sort of associates certain spaces with certain things. And so a lot
Yes,
of us are doing this work in our homes, which means that suddenly what's supposed to be that automatic safe space is actually holding on a lot of that tension for us. And
exactly.
that simple fact of like removing yourself and putting you somewhere else will help you to unwind, because your mind is going to say, oh, okay, I'm in a different place now. So we can focus on something different. And
Exactly.
that for me, like as soon as I leave my apartment and I go for a run, or just a walk, or sometimes just I'll sit somewhere, but not being in the space that I now associate with this work has been really helpful.
The brain is an interesting organ. It's very instinctual, and it often operates on triggers,
Yeah.
for better or for worse.
Yeah.
So everything from an object sitting on your desk to the act of how you prepare for the day,
Mhm.
to there are triggers that get you into that mindset where you're ready to focus or ready to transition.
Right.
And it's very important that we pay attention to what those triggers are, and if possible, develop positive triggers,
Right.
such as the walks, or
Right.
lighting a candle before you sit down at the keyboard.
Yes. Yep. Have
Those
some
triggers are
some
so
version. Yeah.
helpful. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, I think the thing that I used to do in the beginning of this, and it was wrong, I make mistakes sometimes, but I would encourage people to find a hobby, right? I'd be like, there's got to be something that you can do. And what I've sort of realized as time goes on is, yeah, if you have a hobby, that's great. But really, what I'm wanting people to do is to find a way to disconnect. And so,
Mhm.
I think you and I had talked about like, we wanted to sit down and have dedicated time for reading, or,
Mhm.
like cross stitching. And I couldn't ever slow my mind down enough. I haven't finished a book in a really long
I
time.
haven't either.
Yeah,
And I'm
because
a
like
writer.
I just can't do it. So
Right.
really for me, the tradition or the positive trigger has been putting my phone on silent. And I don't care what I do after that. I can watch TV, I can clean the apartment, I can run errands, as
Yeah,
long as I'm spending it and dedicating my energy to something that isn't the work.
exactly.
Right. So we put so much pressure on finding like the perfect way to disconnect. And I don't think that
There isn't one. I
exists.
mean, it can be anything from binging a stupid TV show.
Mhm. I thought you were going to
to-
say food, and I was like, been there.
Been there too. Right now, my thing is Grace and Frankie.
Yeah. See, we've all got it.
Grace and Frankie on
We've
Netflix
all,
is like
yeah.
my moment of escape, and I've been
Yeah.
watching a couple episodes at a
Yeah.
time, and I zone out. You know, uh, Going outside and literally touching dirt,
Yes.
just that is a scientific
Yeah.
fact that
Yeah.
I will never fully understand, but there are microbes in dirt
Mhm.
that actually have an effect on your nervous system and your stress responses.
Yep.
Just little things that doesn't have to be built up into a huge hobby. It's just
Right.
that disconnect is the key.
Set a tradition, and your body will help you more than you realize, because soon it will start to realize, oh, when I see this, it's time to give ourselves some space.
Exactly,
So yeah, I
exactly.
think that really resonates.
It's not just
Well,
about avoiding disassociation from our people around us, but from literally the world around
right,
us.
right. I struggle with that. It's
Yeah.
something to work on.
Yes.
Shani, I am shocked by this, but we are actually almost at the end of our time. So the question that I like to ask in closing is, if you could leave the Afghan evac members with one message about this topic, what would it be?
It would be to try to zoom out. That's one of my catchphrases I've used for a long time, but zoom out to see the world as a whole and your space in it, and that you're going to be okay. It's hard to believe that in these difficult moments with people who are going through more than most of us have ever imagined, but it is important to keep that in mind, that you're going to be okay, because if you're not okay, you can you can't do this wonderful work.
Right.
So just zoom out and look at the big picture of the world as it is right now, which is chaotic, but we're going to be okay.
Yeah, I think in the phrase of support systems, the thing that I hope people take away from this is that you're not alone.
Right.
Even in the moments where you're just with yourself, there is a way to set up a structure so that you can be getting that space and that support that you need. There's always a way to find it.
And we bounce from crisis to crisis, from hour to hour.
Right.
But you're not the only one going through it.
Right.
And especially in those little mini crises from hour to hour, you have to zoom out and know that you're going to be okay.
Yeah. Shani, this was actually really helpful. I think that it will matter a lot to the members of our community who sometimes I see struggle to figure out how to set up those support systems. Thank you for your time and for your wisdom. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.